So, hello everyone. Welcome to the afternoon panel session on eco-Zoic policy session. A QA panel discussion with Dr. Brian Swimme, who's with us online soon, and Dr. Stephen Posner. Thank you for coming here in person. In the continuation of the theme of this symposium, this panel discussion attempts to bridge the boundaries between narrative, research, and policy. Before I pass on to Emille to presenting our speakers, a quick word on the format. So this session starts with a presentation by Dr. Brian Swimme on the topic of the origin and development of eco-Zoic era. And we're going to have a time for questions to both panelists and a moderated discussion. And later on, we open the ground for questions from audience, the QA session. Emille?
Okay. So as Tina mentioned, we have Professor Brian Swimme with us today, who is a professor at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, where he teaches evolutionary cosmology to graduate students in the Philosophy, Cosmology, and Consciousness program. He brings the context of story to our understanding of 13.7 billion year trajectory of cosmogenesis. Such a story, Brian feels, will assist in the emergence of a flourishing Earth community. He received his PhD from the Department of Mathematics at the University of Oregon in 1978 for work in gravitational dynamics. Swimme is the author of The Hidden Heart of the Cosmos and The Universe is a Green Dragon. He is co-author of The Universe Story, which many of us are familiar with, which was the result of a 10-year collaboration with the cultural historian Thomas Berry. And today we are privileged to have him on board to talk to us more about the eco-Zoic era and its principles and origins. And in person, we have Stephen Posner with us today. He is the Director of Policy Outreach with the Gund Institute for Environment at the University of Vermont. In this role, he leads programs and develops strategic partnerships to connect Gund research with leaders in government, business, and NGOs, internationally, nationally, and also locally in Vermont. Stephen is an expert in science policy who has worked with researchers from around the world to impact real-world policy and management decisions. His research has appeared in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, Environmental Science and Policy, and Nature Communications. Previously, he led policy outreach at Compass and consulted with global companies to measure how they impact and depend on nature. And now we're going to pass it on to Brian, who's going to talk to us about the origin and development of the eco-Zoic era. I hope, if Zoom is working.
Okay, great. Well, no feedback. If you don't like something I'm saying, write it down and give me what it means to you afterwards. My topic is the origin and development of the Zoic era. I want to begin by saying I think it's important that this achieving into that we're part of has two dimensions. It has a change in infrastructure, our own agriculture and our buildings and technology, and there's a change in mentality. I think it's important to remember both. My main focus is on mentality, and I see the increase in carbon as a symptom of our basic mentality. You would agree. It's all change at the same time. My focus would be on the change in conscious mentality that is upon us. Here we go. the main change that I think we need to consider carefully is movement from on the short term and the near at hand in order to bring into the whole of things. So, for instance, entire planet, and in a sense, is our concern. It's thing. It's a planet inside of a solar system. That has to be our focus. But also the depths of time, they have to be brought in our thinking on a regular basis too. I think if only a small segment of time, it's difficult to get a sense of what we are about. About the origin of the my approach is to say that the origin of the Ecozoic era is the creative energy of the system. And now, the danger here is to think of the creative energy of the solar universe as there and hide the point compared to the urgent matters we have at hand. My suggestion is that if we can find a way to remember the whole, it will give you we need and the confidence forward with the particular challenges that beset us. So when I say the origin is the creativity and the creative energy of I mean the discovery that we in a developmental universe, we're always in the midst of development. But at certain times it is so large to identify these major trends. And so the Ecozoic era is the major transition of our planet. It's something that is deeply rooted in the dynamic of matter and energy and life. So the first was the movement from this vast cloud of atoms into our Earth, which was molten rock. So the first transition is into a molten planet. The second is a molten planet to give birth to the air and the oceans. The air and the oceans continue to evolve, but we have a new system now. It's a molten planet. It has land and air and ocean. And then we have the third transition is to the development of life. And the word we use to speak about is the biosphere, so that we begin to serve as it by life itself. And now in order to understand the evolution of we need to include all of these components. So now we come to our transition, the fourth transition, and this is the transition that is bringing forth and has brought forth humans. And so this idea goes back to thinkers like Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Maybe you have studied him and Vernados, and it's to picture human activity, human thought as surrounding the planet. So we really find ourselves in the birth of this new era of Earth. Ecozoic era. Some people call it the emergence of a planetary. Some people, the emergence of an organism. Have a set of terms because we're in the very middle of it, right in the middle of it. I guess my main point here is to say that, that all of the institutions of our time are in the midst of this transformation. So in different ways, ag is transitioning. A law, earth law is emerging, which is something very new. The legal systems and so forth. And what I'm wanting to suggest is that religion and we are also in the middle of this transition, and that really is what I'm attempting to articulate. That the religious faith or faith in life itself is this realization that forth is as the appearance of the Pacific Ocean. That's the sense of the whole I am wanting to evoke, to say that this is the origin of the Zoic is in the fundamental energies of the universe, and especially of our solar system. Now, in terms of the development, someone has I'm getting a lot of noise. Maybe it's could you mute? Thank you. Okay. Now, to speak about the development, because in addition to all of the very specific and important changes in tactics and strategy about bringing forth new institutional systems, I want to make a general statement, and that is that I think the development of the Ecozoic is carried out by leaders who inhabit Ecozoic consciousness. I think that is what they have to say. So the Ecozoic consciousness is portion in the superorganism coming forth. And I have two examples I wanted to share with you as a way of giving you a sense of what I think of as Ecozoic consciousness. And I want to hear what your thoughts are on this form of mentality. I'm talking about a fundamental evolution of human consciousness. We've had several in the past. This is another one. So here's my two examples. The first one is a scientist, an ichthyologist, who has dissected a fish and looking at the structure of the brain of this fish. Now, one of the amazing things is that the fish really did invent brains. The mammal brain, our brain, the primate brain, which came out of the mammalian brain, the mammalian brains are limited in terms of their forms. The fish have all kinds of forms of brains that one of which developed into the mammalian brain. So anyway, just imagine you have this picture of this scientist who is in this brain and learning about the structures, and then he's overcome with a sense of gratitude because he's thrilled by learning about the universe and learning about life and learning about brains, and so he just wants to give thanks, and so he how hard his parents struggled to graduate school, or how hard if it's a woman, sacrificed and sort of to get education. And there's all this feeling of gratitude, and then in addition to his ancestors, it kind of dawns on that wow, thankful for having a brain at all. That is what is enabling him to taste this joy, takes the next step, and he gives thanks for the fish who invented the brain. And then there's this moment, this crossover moment, industrial to ecozoicness, when he realizes that he is literally the development of the fish he's examining. And then he understands in a very deep way that the privilege of human is the privilege of participating in this amazing development universe. Now I'm going to take this one step further, just because I want to go beyond just thinking in terms of Earth, and that is, this goes into my own field of so you look at we have human beings. I don't know when we started being amazed by the stars, but somewhere in the past 100,000 years, 200,000 years, we just became fascinated by the stars. And by pursuing that fascination, we came to realize that the stars actually create the elements of the universe and explode and share them with the rest of the universe. And so that when we tonight, when you go out and you look at the stars, when we look at the stars now, we know that they gave birth to each and every one of the atoms of our body. So that there's this moment, this bizarre moment, that we see we are the further development of the stars, reflecting on the stars. And another way of saying it is maybe slightly sounds counterfeit, but if we can think of the creativity that with the origin of the universe, and then lead exploded, and then to our own, and so with the stars tonight, looking at not just stars, but a process. When we're looking at that process is what led to our looking. So when we look at the process, we're actually looking at that witching. I mean, it's an amazing discovery. It's just blows my mind. I think about it, and I'm sure many of you have had that experience. You see, this is the way in which the Zoic is coming forth. It's awakening another dimension of human consciousness, and this type of deep immersion into Earth's process is something like a new form of recognizing the sacred. The sacred, maybe that's not the best word, but it at least indicates how I'm thinking about this. So there we are, and I don't know exactly if this is the moment when we are to dialogue, or if you have another step in your process, but I very much look for a dialoguing with you.
Thank you, Brian, for this insightful and fascinating presentation. Do you hear
Who
us?
is speaking?
One of the moderators, Tina.
Tina?
Yes.
Good to meet you, Tina.
Nice to meet you. I'm fascinated by your presentation, and the origin and development of Ecozoic era, as you put it, the process of creativity, the molten planet, then the air, and the development of light, and now we are approaching, hopefully, to the Ecozoic era, which is another process of creativity. So it seems to me that Ecozoic is this meta-narrative. And that I would like to, in continuation of this storytelling, this meta-narrative, I would like to pose a question to the other speaker that we have in this room with us about the applicability of this meta-narrative in policy domain, because we are together here to talk about the Green New Deal, or that we are transforming it to Eco-Zoic New Deal. So if this process of creativity is embedded in this meta-narrative, I would like you, Stephen, to explain to us or enlighten us on the applicability of this meta-narrative in policy domain. And if you can give us some examples of if there have been an example out there that a meta-narrative before in the past has been translated to policies.
Sure. This mic's on? Yep. Can you all hear me okay? Great. Thanks for inviting me to think together about this and to be on this panel. The eco-zoic meta-narrative seems to me to come at an opportune time right now, given the conversations around Green New Deal, the policy windows that have been presented by the conversations among policymakers at all scales. We just heard earlier that mayors at the municipal level are interested in learning more about this, and we see it at the federal scale too, both in the US and in other countries. And those policy windows are really hard to predict when they open. A policy window being a time when there's a chance for a lot of uptake of new ideas and research and knowledge into actual policy making. So it's hard to anticipate when they open. Sometimes you can create them, but most importantly, I think, is to respond to them when they become open. And I feel like a lot of the conversation that I've been hearing is really relevant in responding to the current window of opportunity to inform policymaking. When I say inform policymaking, I don't necessarily mean specific laws that are passed by policy bodies that go into effect. Sometimes the impact of conversations looks like just framing the dialogue. So being able to frame that large policy dialogue in such a way that people are now talking about the eco-zoic regularly, whereas they weren't previously. And an example of this happening in my lifetime that the Gund Institute and John Erickson and Josh and others were also involved with was the Occupy Wall Street movement, where I feel like there was a moment in time, this was 2011, I think, lots of different factors kind of converged to create this window of opportunity to discuss income inequality in a way that I feel like it hadn't been previously taken seriously or talked about among people at all different levels of policy. But because of the right set of factors being present and the activity of groups on the ground, grassroots-wise and elsewhere, the whole conversation shifted, and now we see still today big policy talk about income inequality as an issue that comes up in presidential candidate debates. So I think of that as a similar kind of situation in terms of the societal ripeness for the conversation to happen.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. This is a question for Brian. So I guess following on from the question to Stephen, we're really interested in, I guess, your experience of the ecozoic as narrative and how you see the ecozoic narrative in your work, kind of framing dialogue, like Stephen mentioned. So if you have any comments on that at all.
So a framing dialogue.
So following on from Stephen's point about how meta-narrative is useful for framing dialogue.
Yeah.
So taking the ecozoic narrative and I guess my question to you is, how do you see the ecozoic in your own work? Because you've been involved with this concept for so long. How do you see that kind of influencing current dialogue around various issues, and how do you see it kind of playing out in the decision-making space or the governance space, the kind of policy, the broader policy space?
Yeah. I guess I think of things on 3 levels. So I get this from Thomas Berry, really, that level of principles, then there's particulars for moving forward, and then the tactics, kind of like at the street level. So my has been largely at the level of principles. The way in which I see the relating to dialogue concerning these larger breakdown in the unconscious anthropocentrism of industrial culture. We, without even thinking about it, we take it for granted that we are going to make change, control the situation in the ways that we think are best. I'm trying to encourage a new language around all of this. That even to speak of natural resources, as soon as we talk to preserve resources or conserve them, we're all mindset of managing the earth. Right? So rather than approaching it that way, I am hoping to encourage in the dialogue a way of not natural resources, but relative. So we're joining a process as opposed to managing a process. You know, the fish are relatives, the soil community, the DNA is community. The way in which I get excited about the dialogue, the policy level, and is influenced by the narrative of the ecozoic, is when thinking about rights of nature. So to elevate the other than human component to a level on a par with the human species. So we see ourselves as members of a community and engineers of a situation. I hope that connects a little. Let me just say one thing. There's a lot of feedback, so I keep hearing myself talk. It's bad enough I have to hear it once.
Yeah, we'll mute the microphone for the next.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Brian. That's interesting because we just had brainstorming on this ecozoic Green New Deal, and Peter Brown at some point mentioned that, oh, this is too anthropocentric. And then it comes back to what you just mentioned, this language of control and management. That's what we're trying to overthrow that.
Great. That's great.
The language of natural resources. So my question is actually regarding this, is that, so when we are in this transition, how do we prevent the enclosure of the ecozoic as a concept? In other words, how do we avert the potential that this concept becomes yet another institution? So this question is for both of you, Stephen also, and Brian.
Yeah, start with Stephen.
Can you define enclosure a little bit more so I understand what's meant by that?
So what we see, there have been many languages of deep transformation, not a simple transition. But many of these institutions fell prey to the shortcoming of our, I guess, lack of imagination, lack of creativity. So how do we prevent that? That ecozoic or the ecozoic New Deal fall prey into the shortcoming of many other institutions that were set to create a paradigm shift in our anthropocentric dialogue, non-anthropocentric dialogue.
It's a really good question and a good time to be thinking about it. One idea that comes to mind is that exactly this kind of forum on a regular basis to keep the creativity alive and to not envision a conclusive manifesto at the end of these couple days that is a static document that doesn't change over time, but to build into the work a process for regularly revising it and reviewing it and adapting it as society shifts. I mean, the nature of the issues are really dynamic. So I think that the work to facilitate, to join this process of an unfolding of the ecozoic needs to also be really dynamic and adaptive in that way. And maybe it's already built in and I just don't know because I'm new to this group, but.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian, would you like to join for this question and answer this also?
Yeah, I would. So I love the question. It is it goes right to one of our central challenges, which is hubris, right? So we you see it in science in particular. We had it in the 19th century. We thought we had it nailed, this famous quote. But then we discovered quantum physics and special relativity and then general relativity and complexity science. We were completely wrong century about saying the end of science. And that I think that maintaining a stance of objectivity is absolutely crucial. So I like to emphasize we don't know what's now. We have to work as hard as we can to participate in this transformation. We just don't know. That's what got us into a lot of these problems, that we thought we'd figure things out. And we engineer the rivers from continent, right? The core of engine ruined so much of life, all trying to do the right thing. We can't be reminded too often this process that we're in, of the universe, the earth, this process is mysterious, complex, imagining. So to be reminded of that is what I think is important. The way I like to look at ourselves right now, those of us that are alert to what's going on, we are like the hydrogen atoms that existed in this cloud 5 billion years ago that was to become the Earth. All right. Now, I mean, we are just talking about hydrogen and helium and these atoms, and they're moving according to their own intrinsic dynamics. And so they're drawn together and they give birth to this. And so the future is coming out of their creativity, but they don't know what's coming. We're just the same way, even though we have brains. I mean, we're participating in something amazing, and we have to over and over again articulate as best we can what we think is important and valuable, and how we can preserve that. So I think it has to be an ongoing commitment to a creative process of reflection with the best we have to offer, always aware that it's tentative and hypothetical as we move forward. And here, the last thing I'd say is, this process is not being carried out by humans. We're just part of it. We're just part of it. So we have to give voice to the brown bears. We've got to really experience what the struggles they're having, and the tuna. We have to develop an intimacy with what they're going through, and to bring what they have to offer to this process of reflection. It is very much a creative process involving the entire Earth community. That's how I see it. Was there applause?
Yeah. Yes.
I was muted. Could you do it again? I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Thank you.
So my next question is for Stephen, and I guess in partaking in this transformation, as Brian has elaborated, and kind of, a lot of our research here of many of us in the room is about giving voice to Earth communities. So I'm really interested in what kind of leverage points exist for policy influence, particularly when you consider that we live in times of precarity, and we kind of have these strong political divisions between the left and the right, to use kind of simplistic terms. So I guess I'm interested, as researchers and people that are really interested in giving voice to Earth communities, what kind of tools and channels should we be looking for and communicating our ecozoic research?
Yeah, thanks. From the cosmological to the practical, which I love to span those boundaries, because I love the big ideas and keeping in mind the whole system and deep time and all of that. In the practical world of the kind of policy that I've been involved with, somebody once described policymaking as the art of the possible. Right? And I think this meeting was set up to think a little bit about the impossible, right? So now, bridging back to the possible, I think that a few of the really key things would be partnerships is a really important leverage point. Working in concert with other groups to be able to tap into their intellectual capital and the networks that already exist is really key. Advocacy coalitions is a jargony academic term that's been used to describe the importance of groups coming together to advance ideas in policy systems. I also think that going from partnerships, relationships are really key. They're a really important lever for change. So face-to-face relationships and interactions with the people who are in these decision-making communities that you hope will use or find this work to be useful. So just having a beer with somebody, it could be as simple as that, right? Having that conversation, and when you do that, now I sound like I'm preaching with advice, but I've found that it's really helpful when doing that to have it not be about me and my ideas at all, but completely focus on the other person. What do they care about? What matters to them? If I can listen for that, then I can understand what might be used or useful to them in the way that they do their work. So I spend a lot of time trying to learn from policymakers what they focus on and why they care about different issues. And it is really hard to predict. policy and public attention lurches from one topic to another in a way that it's incredibly hard to tell where the puck is going. But being in close contact with people and having those relationships helps you be able to anticipate trajectories. One last thought on leverage points to consider. You know, and I would say it's a word of caution. The World Bank did a study on themselves once. This was 6 or 7 years ago now. And they looked at all of the reports that they put online, many of which were designed explicitly to influence policymaking. And they found that over 35% of them were never downloaded once. So I think we don't want a manifesto to become another PDF full of solutions that's buried online somewhere nobody reads, right? So thinking about how to avoid that happening reminds me that it's got to be framed in a way that the people who could use it can understand it. So the language piece is really key. And I love the attempts to get rid of the jargon and simplify, short, digestible sentences, all that kind of stuff. It's got to be connected to the right people at the right time. Connected to policy windows, opportunities for change in policy systems that might already exist. And it's really got to speak to the question of so what, right? If you were to bring a manifesto in front of a policymaker and you were to sit down and try to describe what it is and why it's important, and they were just like, so what? Like, why does it matter to me? Why would I want to do anything differently? You need to be prepared to answer that question and to get right to the point of why it matters and how it will make things better in a way that's compelling and understandable.
Thank you, Stephen. So, cosmology again, I guess. Brian, would you like to make a comment on this, or we have many questions and we can also open up to for the ground to participate?
No, Stephen, that was brilliant. I wouldn't be able to add anything. That was great. I loved it.
So I can either ask a question, or maybe we can open up for the feast. Open up, or
yeah,
open up for the ground. Yes,
let's open it up. We've got questions from the floor. So we've got a mic with John.
What we're going to do.
Take that.
What we're going to do so that Brian can hear you is if you could come up, because he can only hear through that. So if you could come up and ask your question right here, that would be awesome.
So Julian, you have your hand up.
All right, Julian.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for speaking with us today. I certainly really appreciate that you taking the time out of your busy schedule to meet with us and reflect on a concept that has been near and dear to many of our hearts. So first, before I dive right in, I just want to say thank you. One particular question that I've heard before and that has kind of stuck in my mind a little bit that I would love to hear you speak about is that within the grand scheme of the universe, the long scale of geological time, it seems almost that to place humanity on that same scale takes a certain hubris, that the reflection that we are as important as the cooling of the earth or the formation of the stars seems to be quite bold. I'm wondering how you would respond to this particular critique and how you form your own concept of humanity within geologic time. Thank you.
Great question. I mean, I love thinking about this because I think it's vital that we think about this. We have the two extremes. Can I be muted again? Or I'm hearing there we go. Okay, so there are two extremes that we have to keep in mind, and that on the one hand, there's the extreme I was just criticizing, the idea that humans are in charge. We're in charge of the whole thing, and the Earth is here for us. The way Thomas Berry would talk about this is he would say the fundamental cosmology of the modern period is a use cosmology. So everything is here for our use. And he said that's the principal error of consciousness. But so what's the other extreme? The other extreme is to say that the human species is a cancer, or it's a mistake, or even it's just another species, So we have to find a way in between these two, and because if we try to pretend we're just another species, we're not going to take responsibility for what we've done. So how to get in that middle zone? That's what's occupied me. I guess here's what I would say. Humanity amounts to a recoding of planet Earth. I mean, this just blows my mind. And I'm going to say a little more on what I mean by that. Okay, to make it really specific, think of a cheetah, all right? A cheetah is like this amazing animal, and it has a certain form, an anatomical form. It has a certain face. That face, that anatomical form came about through natural selection and genetic mutation. This amazing process over millions of years. Now, but in the future, the form of the cheetah and its face will not be determined by natural selection and genetic mutation. It will be shaped by human consciousness. I mean, to take that in is another way to enter into ecozoic consciousness. What do I mean it will be shaped by human consciousness? I mean this, that we do not have any more wild places for a cheetah to be a cheetah. It's over. So what we have now are these mega zoos where we try to enable the cheetah to run as fast as it can. But in other words, as soon as you have a mega zoo, you have a human decision that has altered the evolutionary dynamics. If Charles Darwin were here, he would agree with me 100% that the primary dynamism of evolution has become human cultural decisions. Now, this is something none of us signed up for. I mean, and it's just suddenly upon us. 3 billion evolution are in a transition into a new. So I think we need to take serious that we have become a planet, just another primate species. We're a force on the scale of the sphere, on the scale of the hydrosphere. The oceans feel our effects now, major ways. So we're a planetary force, but here's the other part. Okay, here's the other part. Power furling through us, which we can call consciousness, a language that we can express in forms outside of us that enables accumulation of learning like where else on the planet. That power, not ours. Power comes from the universe in order to serve the Earth community, so it's two parts. Recognize we've become, and to recognize that we are part of some deep, mysterious creativity that will, over time, an enhanced and vibrant Earth community. that at least my way of trying to avoid these tools and yet to take full responsibility for the effects. I mean, if others have a comment on this, I would love to hear it. This is something that is, I think, so important to reflect on. But before somebody, could I hear it here again? In fact, do you have a follow-up to that? Is it Jillian?
No, I think you spoke fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay for me to talk now? Hi, Brian. It's Peter Brown. Oh, thank you very much for being with us today. I was listening to your talk just now and what you're groping for a metaphor. I thought, and I wondered if what you would think of the notion of being a midwife to the future of life.
I missed the first part of the sentence. Could you start over?
I was noticing that it occurred to me you were groping for a metaphor to talk about how we fit into things at this time in history. And I was wondering if one that would be useful would be to think of ourselves as midwives to the future of life on Earth.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's and it has that echo with Socrates, who thought of himself that way. I love that, Peter. Beautiful. I'm never going to say I'm a cosmologist again. I'm for the future of life. Beautiful.
I'll quit while I'm ahead. Thanks.
A little bit? Absolutely. Was thinking about the changes in mentality that are underway, and one that I focus a lot on has to do with people's perspective of academia and the role of research in making change in society. And I think about linking knowledge to action all the time, and I think about how research can play a really important role in social change, in observing and drawing awareness to what is happening, like what is the status and the trends of the world around us that we're a part of. Research can help explain some of the forces that are underway that lead to what we're observing, right? Research can help us predict or thoughtfully guess at what's coming next, and there's lots of modeling and simulation these days, which is like a whole nother branch of science along with observation and theory. There's now modeling, which has really taken off. And the kind of research that I feel like has been happening here to articulate this eco-zoic New Deal, or whatever it ends up being called, I think can really inspire other people and help motivate groups and societies to aspire to a vision for a different future. And if that's something that we can all be midwives for and help bring about, then it's even more compelling if people can see what they can do and how they can take part. And that's something for later down the road, I think. So far, it's been a lot of great big picture visioning and principles and the goalposts to aim for. But including that component about how everybody can be a part of this and how everybody is a part of this, I think is one of those other levers for change.
Thank you. I think we have another question.
Hey, Brian.
Hi.
My name's John Adams. I participated in the first youth facilitator training for the Awakening the Dreamer, Changing the Dream symposium that the Pachamama Alliance developed. And you had a really great role in that. I really enjoyed what you had to say in that. And I used to give that, the youth version of that symposium at Texas A&M, where I did my undergrad. And
Nice, good to hear.
yeah, so it's cool to be talking with you. It's a privilege. And I remember one segment in particular that I used to emphasize when I presented it, where you're talking about how, we're related in terms of energy, in terms of genetics, and we're like really a family. And I guess in my metaphor, we're like cells in a larger body of the planet. And you say, I think I remember verbatim, it's going to take a lot of reflection to embody this fully, but it is a massive transformation in human consciousness. And you spoke to this a bit in your previous response, talking about taking this in, and you've mentioned gratitude, and I think also what seems to me a really key element in moving away from the like managing, engineering, command and control mode, which is a sense of trust in life or faith in the process. And this is, like I think you also alluded to, a deeply spiritual thing, and not just a different way of thinking, but a different mode of consciousness. And I wonder if you have a sense of what kinds of practices will help us. What does it mean to reflect on this, or what ought we to reflect on, or practices of gratitude, or like how do we develop that participatory, trusting, related kind of consciousness?
Great. Yeah. I have some thoughts, but this is the kind of topic that will occupy many of us, because we don't really have a well-developed set of practices for entering this universe. It's a new universe that we understand, and so one level is under the universe, and then a different level is, as you just said, is embodying this understanding, and that the first step is conceptual, to really understand. Wow, here's what's happening. The other move is the word you used was spiritual. I like that word, but also one of the problems, it has problems. But if you can think of spiritual as having to do with the whole, having to do the whole of things, it's the idea of what would be some practices for us to become the human of the universe. That's my first suggestion, is to give a definition of what a spiritual practice is. It's something that enables us to be the human form of the universe. Now, I think here's the amazing thing. We've learned so much about the universe. It's like we know how the Earth functions. We know thermodynamics. We know about DNA. We know all this great stuff, but we don't live it. That's our challenge. There's a gap between what we know and how we live. And how to cross that gap? Well, that would traditionally be the process of either therapy or spiritual direction or spiritual development. So it's a profound you bring up. I'll give you a couple little tiny suggestions, and these are meant primarily to excite your imagination and come up with more. We desperately need this. So here's one. Here's a little one to give you a sense of where we are in the universe. If you go out at night and you hold up your hand and you look just at the finger of your pinky finger, right, your fifth digit, if you just look at that and you imagine looking right through to the edge of the universe, there are 1 million galaxies behind your pinky. So, I mean, it's just a way of getting a sense of the immensity of where we're at. No matter where you put your pinky, there's 1 million galaxies in it. So just a little sense of it. Here's my favorite, though. Here's my favorite. And this one actually, it is for some people, it's that that used a lot. It's like a drug trip. So, I'm too old for that. But try it. You go out at night. And you lie down on a field and then up at the stars. And then as you're sitting there looking up at the stars, you remind yourself that the word up is relative. So while you're looking up at the stars, imagine people in China that are doing the same thing. But now they're in the bottom of the earth, They're in the bottom of the earth and they're looking down at the stars. So you work on this because it's deeply ingrained in us to think we're looking up. Now, but here's the last step. We think we're lying on our backs because we have weight. In a certain sense, that's true, but if the earth disappeared, we would be weightless. And get this, we would start move those stars we're looking up at. So the only reason we're able to just sit there is because it's holding us. That's the gravitational attraction. It's holding us. And so as you're lying there, you can actually get this feeling that you're on the bottom of Earth, just like the Chinese. It doesn't matter where you are. They can be seen as the bottom of Earth, and you're suspended over the stars only because the Earth is holding on to you. It's such a rush. It really gives you a feeling of. One last one. Let me give you one last one. One last one is this, that in all of the great transitions of the planet, they have been accompanied by vast destruction. So the one we know best is the transition that enabled the mammals to develop and bring us forth, among other things. That transition depended upon a mass extinction. So the way scientists understand it is that there was huge, horrendous destruction, but the native remaining out of that minority, the future of the planet developed. But my suggestion is that we, in personal life, and you see some of the destruction that is taking place in life as a way of free to become that remnant, that small piece that is already ecozoic, so that there is a destruction that has to take place. The industrial business have to destabilize and fall apart. But the trust, as you brought out the word, the trust is that what remains will more creativity, enable you to flower as an ecozoic, embody the dynamics of the planet, the dynamics of the universe. Now, so much more could be said here, but I hope it gives you just a sense thing to invent. So
I'm really loving this discussion that we're having, Brian, about kind of cosmology to policy, and it's really super fascinating. I want to take some questions now that kind of address really knitting this meta-narrative, this cosmology of the ecozoic, again with the kind of concepts that we've been dealing with over the last 2 days, and try and flesh out some more kind of policy-orientated issues and so forth, and bring it back to the theme. So do you have a question that's... Yeah, excellent, thank you.
Hello?
Hello.
And I also want to express some gratitude for what's being shared and for the design of the panel, of having the policy and the cosmology and having both of them. So I hope my question does a good job at being integrative of that. To give a tiny bit of background to the question, it's like a lot of what you've been talking about, Brian, is about this awakening to what the human is, what the human should be, what the human could be in our position. And as we realize our relationships in the web of life, I think a nice juncture point that brings us to policy is the responsibility that comes with it. So with that wider consciousness comes wider responsibility to act, especially if there is midwifery, especially if there's, if we're talking about such an influence on the whole web of life. And another point that you brought up is in general at the very beginning, how you are focusing on the way people, the worldviews and not just infrastructure. And you echoed that a little bit by talking about how education systems and research kind of informs and modeling of the future informs how we see the world. My little understanding is that there's a lot of theories in the world being used, rarely by activists, rarely by people sitting in rooms like this, on how to, sadly, dominate the worldviews of people. I'm talking about advertising or things like that. And so if I tie back responsibility, if I tie back understanding that worldviews are so important, how, and education has a role in this, but what is the role of policy? And once we know how those worldviews are important and actually fundamental to how the humanity as a whole will behave, or our countries, what is the role in policy in either protecting worldviews from being polluted, let's say, by destructive mindsets, or into favorizing the development of a worldview in relationship with that eco-Zoic concept?
Well, wait, don't go away. Wait. No, I love this question. Could you answer it? And then maybe I could have a response, but I only get about 60% of because of the technology, but that's what you were saying. But I love it if you would give how you see things, and then I'll jump in.
I didn't hear was he inviting me to comment first? Or for you?
I think he's talking to you. Okay.
Pass it on to Stephen and then to address the
Yeah, I'll, for the purpose, we'll give it to Stephen, but I'm happy anytime later on to share that.
Okay, great. Yeah, I look forward to it.
Me too. So to me?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sure. It's such a good question and raises all kinds of important ideas about ethics and I think about rights. Yeah, like social agreements or socially agreed upon rules or ways of being that might be preferred over others. I like to think that, like openness to many different viewpoints should be a central part of policy making. But currently it's clear how certain voices aren't at the tables where decisions are made, and certain interests are prioritized over others, and certain communities are, as you put, dominated by people that are in power and their interests. But I think that knowledge can disrupt the power dynamics of these kinds of systems, and I think that it can facilitate people learning about how they can be more responsible to one another. I would say that in the end, it's up to an individual to ascribe responsibility to themselves. It's hard to enforce such a thing on others, but I think that education plays a really important role in creating the conditions where it's more likely that people will come to be feeling of their own accord responsible towards each other and towards the planet in a way that changes things drastically. And I think that we can choose to to demonstrate and to model that responsibility for others in a way that speaks louder than saying what people should be responsible for. So I'm a huge fan of walking the talk. And for the people that biked here from Burlington, Vermont, of which I think there were only 2, yeah. That kind of thing inspires me in terms of, taking it on ourselves to be that change that we are claiming others should join us in. I'll just stop there.
We can get another 2 questions, or if you would like to. Yes, Ivan, please come.
Hey guys. Hi, Brian. It's such an honor to listen to you and in this context of imagining the ecozoic, and I like this metaphor, this pendulum between the cosmological and the political and the practical, and I think it's a very useful metaphor as we imagine this concept in our own works. But I also want to draw attention to other narratives of transformation and transition. I think the way we think about the future and the way we think about what the concepts we use, like the narrative of the ecozoic, to think about the future and change, it's of course it's not the only way to think about it. There are many other ways to think about change and future. And in the course of our conversations with colleagues and professors, we have been also thinking about how indigenous people think about the future and think about transitions. And I was wondering to what extent the ecozoic draws from other cosmologies other than, say, Western ways of thinking about time and matter and change. If you are using, or if Thomas Berry, for instance, is drawing from other ways of thinking about those big concepts, and how productive do you think it's integrating knowledges as we think about this? Thank you.
Yeah. It couldn't be, the question can't be emphasized more too much, because it goes back to the notion of how to avoid of the ecozoic, and there isn't a single tradition that is adequate. Isn't. Western science needs to be brought into conversation with other lineages. Even all of together are they have to keep evolving. But Thomas Berry, he had a general orientation on this question. He had a clear point of view. Already know, but if you don't, you might enjoy hearing it. He was saying that in order for us to develop the wisdom, a sense of deep responsibility for what's taking place, draw upon four traditions. The first would be classical civilizations, the so-called world religions, Buddhism and Confucianism and forth. That would be the first generally. And he said, we're doing that. And the second is of even more importance because it's been left out. And these are the lineages of women, the wisdom traditions of women from around the planet. And then the third, which he said is just beginning, is the tradition of science as wisdom. Now, science has been mechanical during most of the modern period, but it's entering into a transition into another wisdom tradition. And then the fourth, which he thought was the most important of all of these, is the tradition of indigenous peoples. That even though these are at the very margins of our world, they carry precious knowledge and wisdom of our time. And that out of that, we find our way. And it isn't one meta-narrative. That it's meta-narratives. It's meta-narratives. It's that diversity is necessary for us to really take this transition into this new era. That would be Thomas Barrett. I always found it helpful to recall.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
I actually want to also address this comment to Stephen as well. If you could talk a little bit more about how you incorporate different ways of knowing and different ontologies into the kind of knowledge-informed decision-making processes and so forth. So I guess opening up the space from just the kind of science focus into, other epistemological foundations and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about linking knowledge to action, I think broadly about knowledge of all types. So it's common to see hierarchies of knowledge show up in conversation with people where they're prioritizing one over the other. Scientific research of the natural science type tends to be held on a pedestal in a way. It's this objective statistical analysis of things in a way that it is given more power in a lot of conversations. But traditional ways of knowing and indigenous wisdom, I think, is just as important and equally valid and critical to designing policies that works for everybody and that is legitimate and that is fair and just and representative of the people that are a part of that policy impacts. And one example that I was really struck by when I was must have been about 10 years ago, I was working on ecosystem services knowledge and how it has impact in certain decision contexts. And I think I was talking with you about this the other day. There was a group of First Nation tribes in the west coast of Vancouver Island, and in conversation with them, it was really clear that the whole concept of ecosystem services was so radically different from how they understood the role of people and nature in their experiences that it was hard for them to wrap their heads around what was meant by it. And it was so fundamental, it got down to the point of not even being able to parse out nature and people as two distinct things, because talking about the value of the ocean or the benefits that the ocean provides to people, responses would be like, what do you mean? I am the ocean, and the ocean is us, and we eat the fish from the ocean, and it becomes part of us, and we're literally of the same thing. And that I thought was a really important insight that is difficult to wrap into policy and in a grounded day-to-day kind of policy-making sense, but a really important thing that I think it's important to keep in mind and to make sure it's represented in the dialogue.
I think we have another question.
Yeah, we have time for one more. Yeah.
So hi, I'm Stephanie Roy. Thanks for welcoming me, even though I was not here yesterday. I've been a member of the Law and Governance Task Force for this project. And I think I'll start with my question and then explain the context. So my question would be, how do you make policymakers to dream? I think we applauded earlier because one of the things you said we found very inspiring, and I think most people here are people who dreams a lot. And And one of the things Stephen said about speaking to policymakers spoke to me a lot, because I'm VP of an environmental NGO, which is doing environmental litigation and also participating in reforming statutes, for example. And one of the things we do is writing memorandum when new statutes are adopted or modified. And last year we had a statute and a regulation that was allowing drilling on the province, in Quebec, which was never allowed before. And of course, when we write this kind of thing, one of the things we will say is, well, first, you should not allow drilling, because the state of the climate says that at the moment we should transition to like greener forms of energy, and then we will write about science. But of course, policymakers, I'm pretty sure they skip this part when we hand them the memorandum. I think the part that they find interesting is the second part, where we say, well, if you are to drill, then here are things you should make better in the regulation. First, maybe you should not allow drilling at 100 meters away from residential area for X reason. And so they have this thinking of a day-to-day job that they have to accomplish, and also even though they are elected officials serving other people, so definitely seeing that they are serving a community, they will think in a very individualistic way, like, well, people have cars, they need cars, and they want gasoline and this kind of stuff. And so we have to adapt our discourse to the audience we are speaking to. And we were talking previously to how education is important in the way we will train future policymakers. But the thing is, we have to deal with current policymakers because change has to happen now. So bottom line is, yes, we have to be pragmatic in the way we speak, and we have to, and I agree with you how partnerships are important, because as lawyers, we cannot, for example, suggest new measures to be adopted in regulation, because I don't personally know anything about drilling. So we have to partner with scientists, for example. But in the end, I think one of the most important question is, how do you make policymakers to read the science part and to read how it's important to make bigger changes as a society, more than just adopting this measure and framing this particular clause in this specific way, because at the end of the day, they will say, yeah, case closed, we did our job, we can go home. Thank you.
That's great, and thanks for the clear examples of how this kind of thing shows up in your day-to-day in your work. Two quick things. One would be narratives, so storytelling. And that's one of the things that maybe we can draw wisdom from indigenous groups about, because storytelling can help people dream, and it can show people the picture and the vision for a different kind of future that could come about in a way that that can be really compelling. And if you can design a narrative and frame things in a way that a policymaker can then take that and use it as their own words, even better, right? You can directly inform the narrative that others might pick up and use. And then another thing is it connected to what you mentioned about the if-then statement, which I find really powerful in policy conversations, because it reminds us that there are consequences for any action, right? If we do this, then these are the likely things that we can expect to happen. So using that kind of thinking can really open people up to dreaming a little bit bigger, right? Like if, in that case of drilling, if instead of drilling we did these things, and it was really clear what the benefits would be to everybody and to the policymaker and the people they care about, their constituents, right? And it was really laid out for them, so they didn't have to do any of that thinking about how does this matter to them? But you say, if you do this, then these people will be impacted in these ways, and who are those prospective winners and losers, and how does that factor into what you care about? Those might be tools that could work, but it's a big challenge. I mean, dreaming big is, I think it's scary for a lot of policymakers because it involves vulnerability and risk to their position in a lot of ways. So I see it as yeah, I think it's hard to encourage people to make themselves vulnerable in a public position, like as a policymaker, to let them know it's okay to take that risk and to dream big. It's tough. I share your frustration with this challenge.
Brilliant questions. Thank you, everyone. I'm very happy that we opened up for the grant earlier than we were supposed to. And Brian, would you like to comment on how to make the policymaker dream big?
Well, there is LSD.
And any concluding remark from Stephen or Brian is welcome.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to. It's just a rush to be with intelligent people who are thinking about this, and I really mean it. It's, and I think you all feel it. I actually think the thrill of being immersed in this creativity is what will draw more and more people into, and you will think that those who are seeing change and holding on to the industrial consciousness, they are always going to deliver wages. So we will, in the end, because the thrill of the work itself, awesome. I just love being together, and it's so inspiring. Someone with Stephen's intelligence leading the way. It was just really a joy. Thank you.
I'll just end on the note of, well, first of all, thank you again, and thanks to Brian. As an undergraduate, I actually studied physics and astronomy and looked at how galaxies interact outside of the Milky Way, and so the chance to think with that part of my mind again is always really fun. So I really appreciate it. And a lot of the wicked problems that have been talked about the last couple days, because they are wicked problems, they don't have solutions, right? They don't have really clear, easy ways to solve these issues. But I think we can do better. And I hope that everybody here takes a moment to appreciate, building on what Brian just said, that we're in this process of figuring out how to be better in regard to some of these big issues and these visions for how we can partake in the unfolding of a better future. So thanks again, I really appreciate it.
So would like to thank both Stephen and Brian for being with us today. And also I want to thank the audience for being very accepting of our technological difficulties. So thank you for sticking with us. And yeah, if we can please thank our speakers. And I think that, is this it for today? We've got, okay.
Thank you so much, Brian. We're going to do a quick wrap up from our symposium, but thank you again for joining us, and apologies for the technical problems at the beginning.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Okay, so I'll just use this one. If you would please join me in a round of applause for, especially to Emille and Tina and Steve, who's here with us. So thank you. We're just going to do a quick wrap up. Myself and then Ellie and then Peter will close things out for us. I just want to again express my gratitude for all the hard work, for all the folks who put this meeting together. It's been a real joy and a pleasure. For us, it's 6 years of working on this project in various cohorts. So it's really amazing to imagine that we worked at Peter's farm over a hellacious weekend and wrote these grants and thought through it. And is Jeff Garver still here? Jeff played referee between Peter and I as we were pulling and tugging and back and forth, and the result though is just wonderful. So thank you all so much for coming. If you would just please take a moment and turn to someone in the room and express a gratitude to them and exchange back a gratitude. Okay. Can we switch to this one? Okay. I'm going to invite Ellie first.
Okay.
I'm going to try to put the slides up if I can.
You will put them up?
Okay, so now we're going to invite Ellie Perkins up for a few final comments of reflection and also
so people are still thanking. I would just like to acknowledge that this may be the symposium that brings some closure to the Economics for the Anthropocene project, but it is also the beginning of new work that we all are engaged upon, some through the Learning for the Ecozoic project and others through the professional and academic paths that you're all on. And so one thing I would like to do is just mention again all of the people that are not here, even from within our E4A community. There are several PhD students at York University who are working very hard on their dissertations, who are part of cohorts 1 and 2, including Alvi Palazuelos and Keisha Fevrier and Alia Karim. And also there's Maria Gautier, who are PhD students who are not here exactly because they're working so hard on their academic work, and they're just about ready to launch into the world of teaching and also of professional. Alvi's been working, for the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources for several years. So to come back to this question of how we put dreams into practice, how we bring the academic privilege of being able to envision a better future into the world of praxis and of actually bringing that in, finding partners to make it really happen. I would just like to recall some of the aspects of the Economics for the Anthropocene program as it was designed. Every student was expected to do an internship with a non-academic organization, either a government or a private sector or an NGO. And in many cases, I think, at least at York, I'm not sure how this played out in other places, and we'll have to do an evaluation of this for our final report to SSHRC, right? But for many of the students that I'm aware of, those internships and those partnerships that were forged as a requirement of the A4A program did lead to research that had direct mobilization potential and has led into direct ongoing partnerships between those academics and more than academic organizations, right? The second thing that was a theme and an element of the E4A program was that we thought it was important to have community scholars to bring in people from beyond academia to be part of our retreats, part of our visioning sessions, and to try to help to represent some of those different points of view that because of the structures of the way academic privileges work in Ontario and in Quebec and in Vermont, we didn't have the option, and we still don't have the option, of having a particularly diverse student body as part of the, the core group. So I think it's important to remember these things as we go on with our academic lives, because they are examples of ways that we can help to make our visioning process a more diverse one, and how we can build the partnerships that are necessary to bring dreams and visions into reality, to make them happen in the world, not just through policy, but through activism and through the work that is involved in all aspects of the economy. And so a third piece was the field courses. And you remember John led the field course on water in Vermont 4 years ago? And then there was the energy field course in Quebec, where we visited Lac Mégantic and the Beauharnois Dam, and we visited windmills. I think you saw the picture of people jumping with windmills, right? That was at the field course, the energy field course. Then there was the climate justice field course, which was 2.5 years ago now. And so I would just like to mention that there, in this room right now with us, are many of the people that wrote chapters in this book, which was an outgrowth of that climate justice field course. So they include Kelly, stand up, and Alice, and Laura, and Gabrielle, and I can't even see with all the lights, Sam, and Caitlin, where's she? And who else? Allison, where's Allison? Stand up. And there may be others too. Oh, yeah, Martin. That's right, Martin. And many other authors of chapters in this book are also E4A students who were not able to be here today. So is there anybody else that I missed? Right? And also there are a few ringers in here too, which we had to bring in order to make the book even more diverse. But I would just like to call attention to this book and say that for me, it represents a beautiful example of how we are making our academic work accessible and available, and that the whole is better than more than the sum of the parts. So I would just like to thank all of you for being part of that, and end with just emphasizing that just doing your own research is good, but doing it in ways that you do it in partnership with people beyond academia, that you seek out people who are different from you and who are doing community-based work, like community scholars, to be extra advisors for your work, and doing it in a practical way with field courses and going out into the world to check what you're doing in conjunction with others are all really good strategies that you can carry on into your futures. Thanks. Okay.
You next? No, it's you. Well, Brian was reminding us we should think a lot about gratitude, and I'd like to, so I want to thank a number of people who have made this particular event possible and also this whole project. So to Sam and Leah for really a very novel and to me unknown methodology for thinking about ideas. Turned out to be very good and made a lot of advances, I think. I want to thank Daisy and Ursula for all of the details and everything that have, at least to the eye of the observer, been gone 100% smoothly. I want to thank all of you. You took a chance on us, right? This was a novel set of ideas, right? We did a lot of things that were new or new to me, and I guess you have a judgment about how well they worked. Overall, I think it's been great to work with you all. You're wonderful people, taking risks, thoughtful, gentle, loving, and it's just terrific. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in Franklin tomorrow around 1 p.m. or so. Please have eaten lunch before you get there. So we'll be people who want to camp out, they're free to camp out. We'll also have the cabana. I've kind of converted it quite a bit since many of you were there last, and some more, a little bit more lavish than before, but still doesn't have running water, but it does have lights and stuff like that. So looking forward to seeing you then. And just one thing, there'll be, at Sean's urging, there'll be a bonfire. I just got a burning permit this afternoon for that, so. And it'll give us a good chance to lie on the ground and look up at the stars and imagine the Chinese on the other side of the planet, right, also being held up by the Earth. So that's, I think, if it's a beautiful night, as it often is after a big storm system goes through like this, it could be really incredible, right? So looking forward to that if it works. And last, so just a couple of facts about the situation. So tomorrow, the temperature be around 10 degrees centigrade. It'll be around 0 Fahrenheit tonight, I think, right? So Sean is the one that looked it up. 0 centigrade tomorrow night, sorry. 0 centigrade tomorrow night. And the ground is wet, right? So be sure you think about what you're wearing and what you're thinking, if you're gonna sleep outside, take that into account. We have Brian will be happy about this. We have some bears and coyotes and other folks that live around there now. We've kind of created a little place where wildlife seems to be coming more often, and so we're very happy about that. Something to think about. And last, I wanted to thank Dina, who's just been absolutely amazing, and I was being congratulated for putting this project together. The only really smart thing I did, in my point of view, is I hired her, right? And she's been, so let's get her around. And so here's a picture. Here's a picture of the two of us. So unfortunately, there's more truth to it than I'd like to admit. But anyway, thanks so much. All right, bye-bye. Take care. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow.